Welcome back, everybody, to the Chronicles of Degeneracy, Episode 2. Last time on Episode 1, I did not know that this screen recording software could also record my voice, so I was just cackling throughout the entire thing. If you click on my channel, you will see the Episode 1, and you can go to that and react to that. I strongly recommend that you go react to Episode 1 first. Before Episode 2. And, I will just assume that everybody who views this is people who already watched the first one. So, my friend created this, monstrosity. It's gonna be fucking amazing. So, down there, it looks like it's gonna take 25 minutes. 3-parter. Woo-wee! Alright, well, I guess just get some snacks and, let's enjoy this, wonderful thing he conjured up for us. As always, we will have Snoop Dogg reading it to us, so, yeah. And on with the video.
Roll on. David and Pommy were in life two lovers. David had tricked Pommy into a life with him and fought to protect the life he had built, going so far as to kill many people. One day, all that could go wrong went wrong. All hell broke loose, and in the confusion and madness, David killed Pommy. Later, in the same skirmish, David took his own life. For David's actions, he is damned for all eternity, lest he deal his way out of it. And now our feature presentation, Revenge. David screams out in sheer agony, twisting and writhing, bound by chains in a lake of fire. He weeps as hellfire burns his flesh. Deep within the darkest reaches of Satan's realm, David is endlessly tortured. Without mercy, he is pushed far beyond the point of mortality, but never let die. David can never be liberated by death. He is trapped in hell forever. Alongside his eternal physical torture, he is subjected to the emotional strife of having to watch his love, Pommy, spend her eternity in happiness without him. Better man might have taken joy in knowing that the one he loves is in a better place and happy. But David was horribly obsessed by her, and due to his crippling addiction, he would rather see her in hell alongside him than happy without him. David was a selfish man, and one consumed by the need to have Pommy, even though he knew she would hate him after what he did to her while alive. Oh, she would despise him. She would hate his very soul. And the thought of this was more painful than the ever-enduring suffering that had been thrust upon him after death. But there was nothing David could do. He had been buried by time and dust, left deep within the flames of damnation, and Pommy had been admitted into eternal paradise. His weeping persisted over his losing his love, as he reflected upon his dark past. As he whiled away years, he pondered his actions, taking time to truly view his life objectively. He thought and listened to the symphony of the wails of sinners as they, like him, were rotting within the flames. How much time passed? David couldn't be sure. There was nothing to mark the passing of days, much less that of years, or centuries even. For all he knew, he could have been there for days or millennia. Either way, he was eventually approached by a figure, a dark being of unimaginable evil. Even in the white-hot flames of hell, David could feel the air around him become freezing at the approach of this entity. It approached him, cloaked in shadows, with the legs of a goat, horns longer than David's arms, and a greatly muscled body, wrapped tightly in blood-red skin. His eyes glowed with the agony of the infinite souls he has seen tortured since he was sent to watch over hell. Tangled black hair fell around his massive shoulders. David stared into the eyes of Satan, making eye contact with the Prince of Darkness himself. David stood steadfast, chained to the ground, blanketed by flame. He looked up into the grimace on Satan's face, unafraid. Satan sneered and parted his lips to release a single line of speech. Sinner, would you like a way out of here? David reflected on this question for quite a while, before shakily breathing out the words, "No, I belong here." Satan replied, saying, "I could reunite you with Pommy. You could live together on earth again." David, with an expression of defeat raping his face, miserably choked out the words, "She would hate me after what I've done, and she right well should. I'm a monster." Satan unflinchingly countered by saying, "To send her back without her memory, all she would remember is that she loves you, and you, not Tony. You wouldn't have to play some demented game of impersonating her husband anymore. You could be you and she would love you for you." For the first time since he arrived in hell, David smiled. He thought about the possibility of being with Pommy again, and happiness saturated his thirsting heart. He accepted Satan's offer, but inquired as to why he would let him go. Satan replied by saying, "You would have to do something for me. When I send you back to earth, you wouldn't have Pommy yet. First, you would have to kill 1,000 evil men so that their souls can come to me. You would return to the day after your death. I would speak to your mind to tell you who to kill next and where to find them. You cannot question what I say, ever. You would have all the weapons you need whenever you want them.
Shit.
No gun you have will ever run out of ammo. No blade will ever grow dull. You will be free to kill as much as you can.
Fuck.
Are you ready? David, without pause, nodded his head. David blinked, and when his eyes opened again, he was on Earth, in the same city in which he died. He wore a black suit and pants with black shoes and a black undershirt. He also wore a gray tie. He realized that he had materialized outside of a church. By the look of those entering a funeral, a mournful congregation flooded through the doors, dressed in black, as even more streamed past the porters. David entered the church, hoping to see who had died. He slipped his way up to the casket and peered inside. He gazed upon the corpse's visage and fell to his knees. It was Pommy. Her face was completely white,
No
and
shit.
there was still a hole in the side of her head from where David had shot her. Apparently, it is harder to cover up a wound from being shot point blank than David had expected. While nobody was looking, David shared a last kiss with his love. Her lips were cold with the embrace of death. He whispered to her, "So long and good night," and left the church. As he walked down the street, his mind was a hurricane. He had no idea what to do or where to go. Satan still hadn't told him who to kill, and he felt as though he didn't belong on earth. David had seen the horrors of hell. How could any human lead a normal life after having experienced that? In his preoccupied state, David ran into a man walking the other way on the sidewalk. David muttered an emotionless sorry and continued walking, but he heard a voice. In his mind, Satan hissed the words, him. He's the first. Not wanting to question Satan and not caring enough to protest, David reached into his pocket. Suddenly, a knife appeared there. As the man walked the other way, David turned around and began to close the gap between them. David didn't feel the need to be particularly violent. He simply stabbed the man in the neck and then twice in the head. The man fell dead. Suddenly, David felt it again. The rush, the enchant of murder. He hadn't known this feeling in eons. The last person he killed having been himself all those years of torture ago. He remembered why he had killed those people during his previous life, and he wanted to kill more. He began to think that maybe killing 1,000 evil people wouldn't be so bad. David set out to continue his killings, Satan giving him the encouraging message, "Give him hell, kid." David killed more people. He ventured across the USA, murdering people in increasingly inventive ways. He experimented with guns, poison, hangings, beatings, and anything he could think of to end someone. Then David was told something that was off-putting to him. Satan told him to kill his own father. He resisted, and Satan angrily said, "I told you not to question me." With that, David dropped to the floor in pain, a searing heat spreading across his body.
Fuck.
Satan said, "Now will you listen? He deserves it, David. He's been cheating on your mother with his lawn skipper. But the lawn skipper is a guy." David said. Satan replied with, "Yes, and your father is gay." This startled David, but didn't surprise him. He guessed that he had always somewhat known. He didn't want to kill his father, but it was for Pommy. He snuck into his childhood home in the middle of the night and poisoned his father's water bottle. Under nightfall, he whispered the words, "I'll still love you to the end. Goodbye, Dad." He knew that come morning his father would drink it. It was a slow-working poison, so his father wouldn't feel anything for a while. And it would kill him in about 15 minutes when it began working. He felt this was merciful. Later during the day, Satan informed him that his father was dead. David mourned the loss for quite a while, taking a month or two off from the killing to ponder what he had done. He spent his days in a soup kitchen, feeding the homeless. He hoped that would impart a tone for what he had done. One day he met a man named Cat. Cat was one of the poorest and most malnourished men that came to the shelter. He was in desperate need of help, and soon, or else he would die. Cat begged the people in the kitchen to help him, to just give him a bit of food or money. Everyone declined, as all the people there had to be fed. One day he approached David, saying he would do work for money. David got an idea. David pitched his grim idea to Cadden, asking if Cadden would help him in his murders. Cadden was surprisingly receptive to the idea. He and David left the kitchen right there and then to begin their rampage. With Cadden's aggression, David's killings became even more brutal. Cadden quite liked to take a hunting knife and cut his victims from the sides of their lips to their ears so as to make a great, horrid smile out of eviscerated skin and flesh. Blood would pour out from their ghastly faces, and as they tried to scream, their loose skin would flap about, drowning out much of the sound. Cadden also enjoyed slitting people's throats and pulling their tongues through the cut. One man in particular who ran into David and Cadden was even found with his tongue pulled out and wrapped around his bleeding neck until he suffocated. At this point, David had killed roughly 300 people. However, the next killing would prove disastrous. David and Cadden met their next victim in an Italian restaurant. The man had just finished eating as they entered. David made eye contact with the stranger and felt a chill go down his spine.
Alright, I just want to make a few notes. That's me. My name is Caden. This new dog pronounces it as Cadden. I don't know why. Yeah. He thought that since my friend thought that, it would be funny and ironic to put us outside of an Italian restaurant because I'm Italian. And as you'll see here, this ain't no ordinary person. I think I'm about to die if I remember this correctly. Oh shit.
He knew something was strange. Something was different, and in the brief moment that the man looked at him, David could see something change in his eyes. A glimpse of recognition flashed across the man's face, and he hurried away from his table and into the bathroom. David had a bad feeling about this killing and sent Cadden to go slash the man's tires so that he couldn't escape if he tried. David then walked outside and stood against the wall. He pulled out a cigarette and lit it. As he waited for the man to come outside, he stared into the distance and tried to recall the man. David felt as though he remembered him from somewhere, but he just couldn't seem to place it. Cadden returned to him and stood on the other side of the door. David put out his cigarette on Cadden's shoulder. Cadden didn't react. They didn't speak to each other, but stood in silence and waited.
David.
Eventually, the man wandered out of the restaurant. He looked very nervous and was visibly sweating. As he stumbled out the door, he saw David and Cadden and screamed. He threw a punch at David and struck him right in the nose. David, stunned at this, lost his balance and fell onto a bench. Cadden pulled out 2 twin knives and began stabbing the man in the back. But the man turned around and struck Cadden as well. Cadden dropped a knife and fell to the ground. Just as David rose again, the man grabbed a hold of the knife on the ground. He stabbed David deeply in the stomach and David fell once again. The man then turned his attention on Cadden. Before Cadden could rise to fight again, the man dropped to his knees and began vigorously stabbing Cadden across his chest and stomach. With one last powerful stab, he lodged the knife into Cadden's chest. All of Cadden's muscles lost their tension and he dropped the other knife. David saw this and threw himself at the man. David caught him and rolled with him along the sidewalk. The man picked up the knife that Cadden had just dropped and stabbed David again.
I'm not homeless.
David grabbed the wrist of the hand holding the knife. David brought the hand to the man's throat and pushed the blade through his neck. Blood spewed everywhere. The man lost control of the knife and David finished the job of opening his neck. It was then that David recognized the man, covered in blood. This was the one of the police officers that had invaded his apartment the day that he and Pommy died. In a rage, David began to scream and repeatedly stabbed the man. David madly let loose a stream of anger, saying things along the lines of, "Dirty bastard, you cost me my life. You ruined everything in both of my lives. And you've killed my best friend. I kill you, motherfucker. This is the end of you." David stabbed him again and again, piercing his rib cage and rupturing every organ he could find. He pulverized the man's neck and bashed him in the face with the handle of the knife until his head resembled a smashed pumpkin. Brain matter leaked across the pavement and pieces of his shattered skull had been flung everywhere. David reached into his sunken face and pulled out the remnants of his eyes. He ate them. David stabbed and mutilated the man's corpse until more of his blood was on David's clothes than in his veins. Then David turned to Cadden, who was still breathing shallow. David began to cry as seeing his partner in such a wounded state. As the light began leaving Cadden's eyes, he was able to muster the strength to pull the knife out of his chest. From the deep wound, blood flowed like a river. Cadden's breath began to creep past his cooling lips and shudders, and blood began to trickle from the sides of his mouth. Cadden was quickly losing consciousness as he began choking and the blood sputtering from his throat. His shaggy mustache became matted against his face by blood. David's tears soaked into Cadden's long hair that had been laid out against the ground. Cadden raised the bloody knife to David and pressed it into his hand. Cadden, rasping, drew out the words, "It's been great, kid." Cadden paused to cough up even more blood, and it began to pool around his head. Cadden opened his mouth once more to speak his last words, "Kill them all, Davy." With that, his head lolled to the side and the air left in his lungs left his body. Between hushed sobs, David softly spoke the words, "Now to Valhalla you go, brave warrior." David knew he couldn't just leave Cadden's body there, and he didn't want to shove it into a dumpster. Cadden deserved better than that. Before David figured out what to do with that, he wandered over to the destroyed body of the police officer. David took out the dead man's wallet and checked his name. David took the glass from his smashed glasses and ran them over the remaining skin of his bald head, letting as much blood as possible free from his body. He coldly forced out the words, "I'm glad to have sent you to hell, Mr. W. White. With all the hatred in my heart, fuck you." David then picked up Cadden's body and ran off to the car. He tossed the corpse into the trunk and took off. David reached a clearing in a nearby forest and had Satan give him a shovel. David dug Cadden a proper grave and let the body lay in eternal rest. David asked Satan for another favor. He communicated to Satan, "I was rather obvious about this latest murder. Could you please make the police not come after me?" Satan responded by simply saying no. David pleaded, "Please, you know what they do to guys like me in prison. I'm not okay. I promise that if I go to prison, it'll be worse." Satan begrudgingly accepted and threw attention off of David. After the death of Cadden, David became very numb. He killed, but he did it coldly and without much involvement. Where he and Cadden would previously mutilate a sinner, he simply plugged them in the head.
Oh,
His
shit.
apathy allowed him to kill much quicker and more efficiently. His number rose from 300 to 400 to 500.
fuck.
Once he was halfway done, he decided to be brutal with his next murder. He was meant to kill a prostitute. He waited until the moon rose over the earth. A new moon. The lack of light through the grim night seemed appropriate. He found the prostitute and paid for her services. He took her to a hotel room. When asked what he wanted to do, David began reaching for a drawer in the nightstand. He slowly said the words, "I want to see what your insides look like. I bet you're not so fucking pretty on the inside." With that, he drew a knife from the nightstand.
Oh, God, no.
The edge was so sharp that as he advanced on the prostitute, the blade glimmered at every change of the angle it was held at. The prostitute screamed and ran for the door, but found it to be locked. And it was not locked manually, but with a key. The key that David had laying in his pocket. He slowly and calmly stepped closer to the terrified prostitute, each footfall drawing death closer to its newest subject. David raised the knife and brutally stabbed it into her chest. As she wailed and screamed for a savior, he dragged the blade down, cutting her entire torso right in two. Once she was in the ground, he stuck his hands into the gaping wound and pulled the sides of her body apart. He looked into her and gazed at all of her organs. She, still alive, simply stared at the ceiling, with tears spilling over the edges of her eyes and blood spewing from her stomach. Blood began to rise up her throat, and it was cold in the warmth of her mouth. David continued rooting around inside her organs, occasionally stabbing his knife into them to see them rupture. He enjoyed figuring out what color liquid each organ leaked once punctured, although most of the colors were corrupted by the excessive bleeding. After David had finished observing her organs, he forced her mouth open. Once he got her jaw to stay unclenched, he forced the knife into her mouth and down her throat, making sure to twist it as it went down so that her tongue, the inside of her cheeks, and her throat would be greatly damaged. Once he was satisfied with the amount of the blade that was inside of her, he quickly and strongly jerked the blade back towards him. He split her neck, chin, and lower jaw in half. And once he had it out, he stabbed it into her forehead. Suffice to say, she was dead. David ripped out her intestines and wove them into a makeshift noose. He slipped it over her mangled neck and cinched it shut. He tied the other end around the doorknob. He then removed the sinew from her arms and tied it around her ankles, connecting those to the windowsill and letting the blood dripping from her body stain the entire carpet.
What the
He
fuck?
slipped out the window and drove off under the darkness of the new moon night. As the night raged on, he visited an old friend, whom he was supposed to kill next. Although the man was less a friend and more a business partner, the man sold several weapons, poisons, and other things of the sort. David had no need for more weapons, but he could use poison. He showed up drenched in blood in the middle of the night. Once the man opened the door, David stuck a knife right into his temple. He was dead before he hit the ground. David stole all the poisons he could find and covered his knives with them. The inclusion of poison sped up David's killing process greatly, and anything David needed, Satan provided. Due to David's poison blades and Satan's assistance, David was able to, over the next few months, reach 900 kills.
Goddamn. Alright, I pause it right here, so I just want to say something. Every single time Satan's mentioned, you're just thinking of the South Park Satan. I don't know why. It's funnier to think of the South Park Satan. Back to the video.
By this time, David had become well acquainted with Satan and didn't resent him for the time he had David tortured. In fact, David had even come to like Satan. After all, Satan was the one giving David the opportunity to see Pomni again. Although David suspected that Satan was just having him kill people at this point, and not people who deserved it.
Fuck.
David had killed children on Satan's command. He couldn't see how they could be evil, but he didn't dare question Satan's word. His suspicions came to a head as he was commanded to kill several nuns in a convent. David knew for a fact that they weren't evil. However, he had not cared in the world about this. He was killing people as Satan told him to, and he was not to question Satan's instructions. He entered the convent with a mission. He ripped through the non-violent nuns with speed and precision, but not losing the brutality. He brought with him a sword, and he would see if he could split one right down the middle with one swing, or if he could behead two with one swing. He would sometimes try to stab them right between their eyes. He cornered the last one, and she pleaded for her life. She asked David why he was doing this. He said, "On the word of the Prince of Darkness, you are cursed to die. Satan will take your soul. Your devotion to good means nothing, for I am Lucifer's reaper. Now it is your time. Bow, mortal. Bow to Satan's sword." He then forced her head down and sliced it cleanly off. David breathed the words, "Ave Satanas," and walked out of the convent, leaving mayhem in his wake. As he retreated from the crime scene, he called upon Satan to give him the power of fire. Satan complied, and David caused the convent to burn to the ground. Satan sent David on a killing spree of people who didn't deserve the damnation David brought. David murdered priests and leveled churches. He had been corrupted with the immeasurable evil power of Lucifer. David's eyes reflected flames as he beheld sights of pure carnage that he had created. Burning bodies ran, screaming from the doors of the buildings he engulfed. As their lives unraveled and they fell to ashes, David looked upon their destroyed forms, knowing he had sent them to Satan's realm. He brought the horrors of hell onto earth, a reincarnated angel of death sent by Lucifer himself to damn the living. During his final 100 murders, David became a being of pure evil, sending innocent people to an eternal fate of unspeakable horror and agony. Satan was using him as a pawn to entrap the righteous in his lake of fire, and thrall to the evil Lord. David's victims were unjustly tortured for all of time. Their skin flayed with metal whips and spikes. They wailed, knowing unfathomable afflictions, for eons. There was no mercy for them. They received life eternal in a fate far worse than death.
Oh,
David
God.
had become Satan's human vessel. However, once David reached 995 people killed on the order of Satan, his powers were taken away. David had to finish the job as a mortal, a normal human, albeit one in league with Satan, who had an infinite weapon supply. David approached the man who was to be his 996th victim with a mace in hand. David bashed the man in the knees with his mace,
Oh, shit.
violently shattering all the bones that connected him. As the man laid on the floor, legs in a disjointed heap underneath him, David stood before him. The man pleaded for death. He couldn't take the pain and wanted David to put him out of his misery. David generously accepted his offer, beforehand speaking the words, "Fine then, you fucking coward. If you want to die so bad you can die endlessly, for the rest of time." With that, David brought the mace vertically down on the man's head and smashed the life out of him.
Fuck.
His skull caved inward. The man had blue eyes, convenient for wordplay, as when David's mace connected with his head, one eye blew left and one eye blew right. Many of his teeth also fell out and landed in his lap with a sickening rattle. David set out in search of number 997. David and him met in a large crowd on a busy street. David couldn't very well kill him there, so he had some time to get to know him. David ended up rather liking the man. David followed him until they were on a less busy street. David then grabbed him by his throat, ducked into an alley, and stabbed him right in the forehead. He was dead as soon as the blade finished its swing. David was more merciful with this killing due to his liking of the man. David met his next victim the very next day. David snuck up behind her with gloved hands, holding a length of razor wire. She got off of the public bus. David wrapped the wire around her waist and squeezed until blood was running down her legs. Then he slid the wire up, due to the fact that the wire was imprinted within her. It was a rather hard job to pull it up, but David managed. He skinned her alive from the waist to the chest and sliced through the surface of many organs and bones. He then dropped her to the sidewalk and watched as blood spread across the concrete. He wrapped the wire around her throat and quickly pulled the loop shut, decapitating her. He made his escape. David took a week to reach victim number 999. The search took him right back to the city he started in. When David met his next to last victim, he took no time waiting to begin. David took with him an axe. When the man caught sight of David, he ran. David.
Wait. Wasn't this good? Wait, no. Alright. I thought that kill number 900 fucking thing was. I thought that kill 997 was like doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what I think, alright?
Again, wearing the clothing he had worn at Pummy's funeral, Shirley looked a mess. He was very dirty and disheveled. His hair was unwashed. His body and clothes were covered in blood, and he wielded an axe. As his next victim attempted to escape, David chased him down. The man moved between alleyways and cars in the street. David unflinchingly followed him. The man ran through the early morning, almost disappearing into the fog on numerous occasions. But David never lost him. David chased the man into a cemetery, and as the man continued to run, his exhaustion was clear. The man slowed down considerably, each pace growing shorter. Then he tripped over a gravestone. David walked, now entirely calm and collected, towards the man. When he reached him, David swung down on his right shoulder, and with all the anger he had harnessed while chasing this man, he swung cleanly through it. David then did the same to his left shoulder. The man screamed like a madman and attempted to make an armless escape. David was having none of it. David swung his axe into the man's lower back, toppling him to the ground.
Oh, God.
David amputated both of the man's legs. As the man shrieked with terror and pain, he squirmed across the dew-covered grass, leaving a trail of deep crimson in his wake. David watched with mirth as the mangled excuse for a human inchwormed along the ground, futilely attempting escape. There was no escaping David. He hadn't lost a victim yet, and he wouldn't lose a pathetic worm-man. David began swinging his axe down into the man's back, each connection of the head of the axe making a wet squelching sound and releasing new blood. The man whimpered like a child with each new cut. He continued squirming about on the ground. He crawled over to the
What
top of a
the
new grave,
hell?
and that is where David brought the axe down upon his head, splattering pulpified
Thank
brain matter and
God.
dust that used to be a skull across the headstone. David put his hand into the stew of head contents that now dripped from the
Dude,
gravestone and
what the
licked the thick
fuck?
liquid from his palm. David left his axe in the pool of squished flesh that was a mutilated cadaver and walked out of the graveyard. He asked Satan who his last victim was to be. Satan told him that he would know in due time. The last victim's identity would be revealed at the strike of midnight. David took the opportunity of the day without any infernal murder mission to explore the city he had known. He visited Pommy's
Alright.
grave and cried for hours.
Okay.
But he knew that soon he would be with her again. He just needed to kill one more person and she would be back in his arms. David's heart had hardened over time due to his many murders, but as he thought about that, he was happy. David had been living a waking hell trying to fight his way out of hell, and it would soon come to a close. But he didn't regret it in the slightest. He would have done anything to be with Pommy again. The old saying of a moth to a flame did nothing to describe how much Pommy drew David's actions out. What would be more accurate would be to say, a moth to a funeral pyre. David also wandered back to his old apartment, still uninhabited, as it stayed a crime scene from his horrible murders in his previous life, now appearing as child's play compared to what he had done with his new life.
Shit.
David found an old photograph of him and Pommy. He pressed it to his lips and then held it over his heart. He waited on his bed until midnight, staring into Pommy's perfect smile in the picture until the clock rang 12. Then Satan appeared before him in physical form again to reveal the identity of his last victim.
Alright.
Satan curled his lip and, with his voice drenched with venom, spat out the words, "You're the last evil man. After what you've done here, you're the most evil man alive. To bring Pommy back to life, you must damn yourself to hell again." With that, he descended back to hell and left David alone in his room.
Oh God.
David felt his head spinning out of control. All that he had done, all of his suffering that he had endured these past couple of years, it had been for nothing. He wouldn't have Pommy again. He would never see her face again. He would never hear her voice again. He would never see her smile, or laugh, or do any of the things that gave his heart fire ever again.
God.
He would never hold her hand again. He would never look into her eyes again. He would never feel her next to him again.
God.
He would never dance with her again.
God.
Everything he had risen from the dead for, everything he had been promised had been stolen from him.
God damn it. Wait a second. Sorry about that. Friend texted me. Let's get back to it.
And by the deception of Satan. He had had his humanity stripped of him in order to be with Pommy again.
No shit.
And he would never see her again. Never again.
Oh, God.
Never again. The words rang in David's head. He screamed out to anyone who would listen, to any God above or devil below, "Please, just one more night, anything. Just let me hold her one more time before you send me to burn in hell." He wept loudly with mourning for a future he never got to have.
Oh God.
He knew that he had to do it. He couldn't come this far and then not bring Pommy back. It was what he had to do. He screamed once more,
Fuck.
this time to Pommy, hoping that wherever she was, she could hear him. He said the same words.
Oh, God.
I tried. Know that I tried. I tried for you. I tried for us. I tried. With that, he sank to the floor in sorrow, still loosely holding the picture of him and Pommy. He kissed his loved one last time, and although it was only in a picture, it warmed his mournful soul a bit. He then brought a handgun to the bottom of his chin. He paused briefly to get in his last words.
God
He breathed
damn.
the simple phrases, "I love you, Pommy, now and forever," all the way to hell and back, and he pulled the trigger. He fell forward, dead. The picture of him and
Fuck.
Pommy was still pressed to his heart. He then took his eternal place in hell to be tortured forever. And Pommy lived again, not remembering what had happened and not remembering David.
God damn. That story was awesome. That was just... I haven't laughed as much as last time, but I don't know. I think I was just like, I don't know. I wasn't really in that mood, to be honest. But still, that was awesome. I mean, like, yeah. If you haven't checked out the first part, I strongly urge you do. That one is like the best one. I'll probably just split this thing up into 3 parts. So this will probably be part 3, since TikTok is stupid. It only lasts 10 minutes. And if this is not part 3 and you're on YouTube, then, well, yeah. Enjoy this, hour and a half fucking session. Well, I hope you had fun. I know I did. Well, I sincerely wish that you guys have a good rest of your day. Alright? Damn, I did not deserve that death. I kinda did. I kinda killed a few people with him. Fucking homeless man. Alright, well, Yeah. Fucking Walter White. Anyways. I know I had fun. I hope you guys did too. See you next time.